Over the last few weeks, I've been researching a little more into what's shifting in the writings of Rabbi Yonatan and the Rambam. You see him going from the earlier part of this work to being a diehard Rambamist, and then suddenly he's drifting towards areas like piety, asceticism, deeper spiritual paths, and you're seeing a shift here. And in order to understand what's going on in the writings of Rabbi Yonatan and the Rambam, you must understand what's going on, where he lived, and what he was up to in this time period. The Rambam was a Nagid. The word Nagid, N-A-G-I-D. Nagid was literally the ruler of the Jews in Egypt. It was not just a religious position as like rabbi of the Jews, but it was a political position. He was considered kind of like what you would call the president of the Jewish community, but it was not an honorific title. It was also a title with real responsibility, and the government would approach the Nagid, and the Nagid pretty much governed his people autonomously, almost autonomously. Egypt was the last community of Jews that I'm familiar with that had such a political power of office, and this continued for a few more generations after the Rambam. After Rabbi Abraham's life, there was a war between the Nagidim who was going to take over for the son of the Rambam, and that's when things started getting a little bit complicated. But the one to take over for the Rambam's Nigidut, his position, was his son Rabbi Abraham. That means that Rabbi Abraham was not just a rabbi, not just a leader, not just a spiritual teacher. He was also a political leader and the leader of the community of Jews that were in Egypt at the time. Before I tell you more about Rabbi Yonatan and Rambam, I think it's important to give a preface to that, and that is, in the world that we live in today, we're used to a very different breed of Judaism than the world of the Chachamim who wrote the books that we study. One of the greatest things that I can think of are this par that exists between Jews and non-Jews, specifically not as people, but Jewish theology and non-Jewish theology, and the amount in which we're willing to engage non-Jews in their belief system. In the Christian countries, it seems that many of the Chachamim were very wary of Christianity and treated it as idol worship, and because of that, there's not much we can learn from idols. There's not much to learn from a sophisticated form of paganism that maybe sells itself as monotheism, but the rabbis that lived in those countries didn't see much value in learning from, the Pope as though how he should live his life as a better. In the world of Islam, though, our Chachamim didn't necessarily view those religions as idol worshippers, rather as a different spiritual path that they didn't receive on outside. But there could be value there. There could be value in religions and approaches. We believe that there could be righteous people among the nations of the world, and there's what to learn from righteousness. If you were to have this conversation with Jews today, they would say, "So what are you trying to do? Make an interfaith summit? What do you want to have? You want to become Jewish, Muslim? What do you want to do exactly?" The cynical attitude which the Jewish community has, first off, a lot of it comes from ignorance, and two, a fear that if I study something that's not mine, I'm going to be swept away with it. There's this whole thing, I don't want my kid to hang out with people that are less religious than them. I want to make sure they go to school with only religious kids, and a college with religious kids, and even in the Israeli army there's a unit of religious kids. And I've always wondered, okay, I understand there's a dynamic of I have rules, you might not have as many rules, I want to run after you. But why are we not educating Jews that other people are afraid of? Why don't people say, I'm afraid to send my kid to school with religious kids because maybe he's going to come out crazy? I'm afraid to send my kid to the Israeli army with religious kids because maybe he's going to come out religious. Why are we always on the defensive? And the real answer to that question is because we are severely deficient in education. We're a Jewish community, not us here, those of us around the table. The Jewish community is very ignorant of Judaism. And therefore, if we were to engage now, if I would bring in a Christian missionary to an average synagogue and have him discuss Tanakh with the Jews in the synagogue, the chances of anyone in the synagogue being able to hold their weight in Jewish theology with a Christian missionary is slim to none. It doesn't mean Judaism doesn't have the answers. It means that Jews are simply not educated enough to engage in this kind of conversation without losing. And so instead of educating people more, we've decided to just isolate people in such a way that they'll never have to engage. The professors on college campuses should be afraid of our children, not the other way around. It should be that a Jewish kid coming out of 18 years of Jewish education knows so much about Judaism that that professor who got his degree in a few years should be trembling in his chair when he meets a Jewish student. But that's not what they feel, because there's a deficient education on our end. And because of that, instead of vilifying our educational systems, we end up vilifying those that have better answers than we do. And it doesn't make us right or them wrong, it makes the whole situation a very sad situation. On top of this, things shifted in the last years of the Jewish community. We went from being Jews in Christian countries and Jews in Muslim countries to being mostly Jews in Christian countries. And the only real experience we have of Jews with Muslims is going to be in the land of Israel, in which we're engaged in a severe political war between who owns this land, who doesn't own this land, who can kill more of who. And I'm not here to justify any point of view or not. What I'm telling you is that it's not like in Israel there's this theological debate on religion between the HaShamayim of the Palestinians and the HaShamayim of the Israelis. This is not nothing to do with theology, nothing to do with religion. It's everything to do with politics is not necessarily bad. It's a war. It's a real war like any war. And because of that, our sentiment is Jews are safe with Christians, and Muslims are the most dangerous thing we ever experienced in our life. And whereas that may be the feeling that people have, I'm not here to take it away, I also look over my shoulder when I walk in the streets in Yerushalayim. I'm not immune to this. But that doesn't mean that that's the way it always was. And it doesn't mean that on a religious level, that's the way that it actually is. And I'm far from believing in a utopia of, let's all sit around the campfire and put our arms around each other, and if we kumbayahu together, then Israel will get back and shalom and Israel. I don't believe necessarily that's the way things are going to work. But what I can tell you is it's always a mistake to look backwards into history with the lens of today. When you want to, listen, I'm a Orthodox Jew, correct? So I have a hard time understanding how David HaMelech had so many wives. Well, guess what? Stop looking at David HaMelech from your perspective. Because David HaMelech is looking at you, not you looking at him. You're looking at them from today. Who's promising you that today is right? I can promise you David HaMelech spoke with the Creator. I can't promise you that you did. It bothers you that Moshe Rabbeinu did X, Y, and Z. Good for you. But Moshe Rabbeinu stood on Har Sinai. And you stood on Mount Soledad. And so it's really nice that you're looking at all of Judaism backwards, but that's exactly what you're doing. You're looking backwards.
Reverse engineering.
It's exactly this. If our Chachamim, the Rambam included, viewed Muslim philosophers as something they had to teach us, then you could say, hey Rambam, you're just too liberal for me. You could say that. That's what a person would tell you today. Or you could say, hey, maybe the Rambam knows a thing or two more than I do. And it would be a mistake. There are some academics that have gone down the road of trying to convince everybody that the Rambam converted to Islam. There's all kinds of nice theories. The same ones that want to tell you that David and Yonatan were homosexuals. Everyone's got their own spin on history. I'm not going down that road either. But yeah, the Rambam knew that people didn't like that he quoted Aristotle, that he quoted the Greeks, and he quoted all kinds of... He knew they didn't like it. Which is why in his introduction to Pirkei Avot, in the 8 chapters of the Rambam, he says, I know that you are unable to accept the truth from whoever says it. And therefore, when I write in my book, I'm not even going to quote Jewish scholars. I'm simply going to say things. And it's all the collection of what I've learned, both from our Chachamim and from other Chachamim. Because I know if I start telling you this one is a rabbi and this one is not, you're going to only listen to the parts that are written from the rabbis and not from everybody else. And it says the Rambam, but you should know, you should accept the truth from whoever says it. That has to be your foundation. There was a Chacham. I suggest you Google him and read a little bit about him. His name was Rabbi Moshe Chazan. Rabbi Moshe Chazan, if I'm not mistaken, was a Chacham in Italy. And one of the, not so long ago, was a great philosopher. Could be, if I'm not mistaking Chachamim with each other, if I'm not mixing them up, that he was into Kabbalah and those kind of things. It could be that this is the same one I'm thinking. It could be that I'm very wrong also. Rabbi Moshe Chazan was not just a philosopher, but a chacham and a very educated person. And he saw that his generation was drifting to other religions, to other places, and he educated himself very much on what other religions would say and other religions would think. And he found that the people who opposed him the most, when he was trying to bring back young people to Judaism by engaging them in whatever conversations they were having in the street, He said it's the fanatic Jews that came to attack him for this. And he writes in his book Kedushat Yom Tov, he says, "ובהכרח צריך אתה לשנות את הידוע בדבריהם כדי להשיב עליהם." He said, you as a rabbi find yourself in a situation where you must learn things from other religions in order to be able to engage people in conversations that are necessary for our religion. תכף רעדה חזתם שם. Immediately you see that they start to shake, these people. וקופצים, and they jump up ואומרים בר מינן. God forbid you should be reading these books. לא יישמע על פיך. Don't even mention that book's name in your mouth. וכאלה רבות איתם, and many things similar to this. האם אין זה חולי הפנאטיזמו? That's an Italian word. He says, is this not the sickness of fanatismo? Fanaticism, thank you. אשר עד צוואר הגיע, that it reached up to our neck. We're drowning in fanaticism, he says.
When was this written?
I don't have an exact year for you. More than 100 years ago.
Nothing new is on this.
Right, nothing new on that. אשר בסיבתו אנחנו בסכנת האמונה הנעימה מקרב מחננו. Then you should know that it's because of this religious fanaticism that the true emunah is being lost from our camp. Because we're unable to think, we're unable to engage, and we're losing people. Because we cannot have the conversations we need to have, we cannot use the tools we need to use, and we're drowning in fanaticism. And you should know that this Chacham, Moshe Chazan, was persecuted by many, many, many people. And he did a lot of work to bring Jews home, but people could not appreciate that. On that backdrop, you have Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam. Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam had a father-in-law whose name was Rabbi Hananel HaChasid. Rabbi Hananel the righteous. And Rabbi Hananel HaChasid was part of a group of people that until recently nobody identified them by names. You don't have like a movement, an official movement. But today's historians want to put them in a category which we'll call Chasidei Mitzrayim, the Chasidim of Egypt. I'm not talking about Chasidim like Fuzzy Hats, Baal Shem Tov, Ukraine. I'm talking pious people of Egypt. This was a group of Jews originally led by Rabbeinu Hananel HaChasid, the father-in-law of Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, who incorporated Sufi Islamic ideas into their Jewish practice. I mean, they sat down and said, look, there's a group of Muslims called Sufi Muslims. Now, you may not be as familiar. There are different denominations of Muslims aside from what you see on TV.
Sure.
And the Sufis are famous, especially in this time period, for being some of the greatest philosophers and thinkers, and it's a very spiritual brand of Islam. You'd almost think of them like as the Kabbalists of the Muslim world.
They had all mystical teaching.
Right, yeah. Then this is very evident, and there a lot of chassidut, like real piety that you're finding among these people. Yes, they believed in Allah. Yes, they followed the Quran. Yes, this was their religion. Nobody's thinking that they weren't Jewish. But they had many disciplines and doctrines and teachings and beliefs and practices that some of the Chachamim felt were very useful to the Jewish people. Perhaps they believed even that some of these originally came from the Jewish people. They believed that some of these, even if they didn't come from the Jewish people, would not hurt the Jewish people if they came to the Jewish people. And Rabbeinu Hananel HaChasid, at a certain point in time, recruits his son-in-law, Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam, to his ranks, and asks him to continue in the spiritual leadership of these Chasidei Mitzrayim. You have to imagine that his father-in-law is this Sufi rabbi, and his father is the Rambam, who in our minds we paint as some diehard rationalist Rambam. And I'm not here to engage those who is the Rambam a rationalist. It's not my place. But what happens from here on out is Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam writes this book, HaMaspik Lovdei Hashem, the Guide to Serving God. There's an Arabic name for it that I can't pronounce. And this entire book is meant to give Jews a spiritual doctrine on how to be not regular Jews. He says that in the beginning of this book. There's a common road. Everybody has to do the common road. The common road is following halakha, keeping Shabbat, eating kasher, going to synagogue, putting on tefillin, wearing a talit. Everybody has to do these things. He said, but when you finish doing everything you need to do, what's next? Now, Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam calls this, do you remember? He calls this, there's the common road and there's
the pious,
the intimate path, he calls it. It means for individuals. There are individuals that can do better now. Yeah, prayer is 3 times a day. What about a whole day in prayer? What about those 3 times a day being 3-hour prayers? They can't ask that from everybody in the community. But if you're a chacham and you're a tzaddik, you're going for the title chassid, a righteous one, then how can you just suffice with 45 minutes of prayer? How is that enough for you? We're not asking everybody else to do it, but we're creating a path. I'm a chassid, I'm a righteous one. There are other chassidim, and we have to codify this path, make a path that we go on. And that's when you start reading in our book some of the talks about asceticism and piety and fasting and abstinence. And you see that Rabbi Yonatan is not trying to guide your average person down this road. But he's guiding a group of chachamim, a group of people. I don't know a number to tell you how many people who are following this path. No good deed goes unpunished. Rabbi Yonatan immediately gets attacked by those who try to discredit him. Who are they going to? The local Egyptian government. And they're saying, you see, Rabbi Yonatan is not even Jewish. Forget that he's not a rabbi or the leader. He's not Jewish. Because the customs that he's using in his synagogue are not Jewish customs. Like bowing down on the floor during services. That was one of their big attacks on him. I have here letters from Rabbi Yonatan justifying this practice, in which he shows this is one of our traditions. I didn't take it from them. I said, but even if we did take it from the Muslims, it's a good thing to take. This submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here you find a few things that are happening in the Jewish cultural realm, aside from a serious engagement with Sufi Islam. You also find in general this concept, can we adopt things from the non-Jews that are good? And as always in the Jewish community, there's 2 camps on that regard. Some are no, you can't, only Judaism, and some say, no, this is the way of the world. It always makes me smile today when I hear Hasidim tell me, oh, you can't do anything, goyim this, goyim that, goyim. You know, half the Hasidic songs are non-Jewish songs. Oh, yeah. Like if you were living 200 years ago in Mezhbush, and you would hear one of the songs that Hasidim sing on Yom Kippur, that would be like the equivalent of singing the Beatles in the Bet Knesset on Yom Kippur. They took a popular song that everybody's singing and turned it into a Jewish song. Imagine if someone sang Jingle Bells for the Chadodi. Now, it sounds funny today, but in 200 years from now, they're going to think it's a serious Jewish tradition born in San Diego to sing the Chadodi this way. And it's so serious that even the Christians copied us. Look at that. Because in Judaism, there's always been this exchange. The winds blow in many different directions. And there's a lot to be read about and uncovered about how this movement worked. If I could tell you just the lineage, essentially Rabbi Yonatan passes down to his son. There are rumors that the Rambam had another son, but I don't really believe that it's accurate.
Does anybody know his wife's name?
I'm sure someone does, but I don't know. Rabbeinu Avam HaChazir is the first big thinker you find of these Egyptian Hasidim. Rabbeinu Avam ben Aram calls him my master and my teacher in the ways of God. So there's Rabbeinu Avam HaChazir, who's the rabbi in spirituality of Rabbeinu Avam ben Aram. From here you find Rabbeinu Avam HaChazir. He wrote a book, like a spiritual work on Shir HaShirim. And where do we uncover a lot of this? In the Cairo Geniza. When we uncovered all these old works on the Cairo Geniza, all of a sudden you see a lot of thinkers in Egypt that we never heard about before. And when you piece them together and realize where did it all fit in, Rabbeinu Avam is not the only one who wrote such a book, but it's perhaps the most conclusive. And like we've told you, there's only a fragment of a much larger work that he wrote. I just recently bought a copy of another piece they found of Rabbeinu Avam HaSpikl of Hashem, entirely in a different area. It's a commentary on the Talmud. We have that as well. So there's Rabbeinu Avam ben Rambam. After him, it's called Kafia al-Abdin. That's the name of the guide to serving God.
In Arabic.
By the way, it's not the only book where you find Sufism influence in Judaism. The famous book Chovot HaLevavot, Rabbeinu Bachaya or Bachya, whatever you want to call it, that's also, you see, Sufi influences there. But the difference between Rabbeinu Avraham and the Chovot HaLevavot is that Chovot HaLevavot didn't tell you that he took anything from anywhere. He was very discreet about that. Whereas Rabbeinu Avraham was much more open about that. Rabbeinu Avraham has a son called Rabbi Ovadia ben Maimon. His son is Rabbi Ovadia. And he wrote a famous book. I don't remember what they call it in English, but in Hebrew we call it the Ma'amal HaBe'er. Something about the pool. They call it in English, the well springs of the pool. I think they have a translation of it. And this is essentially, he talks about the heart being like a well and how to fill the heart with the proper wisdom and purity it needs in order to receive Torah. And you see that Rabbeinu Ovadia relies a lot on his father and his grandfather when it comes to putting together his Torah. After this, you have Rabbi David and Rabbi Yoshua, who also lead this movement. And at a certain point in time, and I don't know why to tell you, this movement fizzles out. And you don't really find a direct lineage, but it lasts for 6 or 7 Chachamim, and then it's over. The parts of Rabbeinu Avraham ben Aram that we're going to be reading in the next months are essentially going to be leaving the realm of rational, regular halakha into a place of you can demand more from yourself. And I think it's fitting. I think as a kollel that's been learning together for 6 years, that there's a time, and you don't have to incorporate everything you learn, but there's a time to say that even in my personal religious observance, halakha, that was in like 3 years ago. I'm a halachic Jew already. Now I need to know what can I do more. And you'll notice that stringencies that Rabbeinu Avraham will suggest are not, oh, you only eat this kosher symbol, or oh, you only tie your shoes. The stringencies are real. They're real. They're about purifying your neshama, about connecting your mind to the Creator. But those are things that take much harder work than whatever the world, the street will tell you is a stringency. So Rabbeinu Avraham is not after stringencies. He's after piety, purity, holiness. Those are completely different terms than anything that we see people yearning for today. B'ezrat Hashem, I'm sure the next months are going to be an interesting journey in the writings of Rabbeinu Avraham ben Aram. B'ezrat Hashem. Right, that's my class for now.